Side 3. Dougal's Scottish Holiday. It is decided. One morning Dougal woke up very slowly. First he opened one eye, then he opened the other. Then he closed the first eye and tried using just one. Then he closed the second eye and started all over again by opening both very wide and very suddenly. It was a terrible shock, so he closed them and went back to sleep. "Come into the garden, Maud, for the blackbird night has flown," sang a voice. It was Brian. "Come into the garden, Fred, for the blackbird night has fled." Dougal sat up with a start. "What?" he screeched. "What? What? What?" "Come into the garden, Ron, for the blackbird night has gone," sang Brian, going over to the stove and putting the kettle on. Dougal watched him from the bed coldly. "Have you gone out of your mind completely?" he said. "Good morning, good morning, good morning," shouted Brian. Dougal got out of bed and went very close to Brian. "You've come very close to me," said Brian nervously. Dougal looked at him very hard and then spoke very slowly and very quietly. "Mollusk," he said. "Listen carefully. In the first place, you have woken me up. In the second place, you are making a great deal of noise. In the third place, it's the middle of the night. And in the fourth place, what are you doing in my place?" He paused. "Take your time and answer slowly. I get the feeling you're displeased with me." Dougal made some tea. "Just answer the question." "Ah," said Brian, "you don't know, do you? No, of course you don't know. How could you? Silly of me, I'm a potty old thing. What must you think of me?" "Do you really want to know?" said Dougal. "Ha, ha," laughed Brian again, just a little nervously. "Ha, ha, ha." He took a sip of tea and a deep breath. "You're taking us all on holiday this winter," he said very quickly. Dougal dropped his cup on the floor. "You've dropped your cup, old mate." "What did you say?" "I said you've dropped your cup," said Brian. "Before that," said Dougal. "Before that? Now you're asking me to remember. Before that, what did I say?" "Yes, what?" "Oh, difficult to remember," said Brian. "Difficult to make the old brain tick over." "Force yourself." Was it about winter?" said Brian. "Yes," said Dougal. "And a holiday?" "Yes." "About winter and a holiday?" "Yes." Could it have been about you taking us all on a holiday this winter?" Dougal dropped his saucer. "You've dropped your saucer, old thing," said Brian. "I know," screeched Dougal. "I know, I know, I know." And he picked out the cup and saucer, dropped them again, kicked them across the room, and jumped onto a chair. "I know." "Well, that's all right then, if you know," said Brian. "Can I have another cup of tea?" Dougal sat down heavily. "Pour me one and tell me the worst." "Well," said Brian, "we thought it would be lovely to have a winter holiday this year, and as you're so good at organizing things, we thought you would make all the arrangements and take us." "Who's we?" said Dougal. "Florence and me and Mr. Rusty and Mr. McHenry." "Anyone else?" "Dylan." "And?" "Ermintrude." Dougal groaned. "What have I done to deserve it?" Brian finished his tea. "Well, that's all settled then," he said. "I can leave the arrangements to you. All right?" "No, it's not all right," said Dougal. Where are you taking us?" "Give me time to think," said Dougal. "Please." "Of course," said Brian. "I'll get the others and we'll come back in, 10 minutes?" Make it 3 days, and not a minute sooner." "They're very impatient to start," said Brian. "Then tell them to start," said Dougal. "I shan't mind." "Without you, our leader, our friend, and holiday arranger?" "Get out," said Dougal. "Any tea left?" said Brian. "Get out," said Dougal. And Brian got out. Dougal sat down and thought. He thought it was rotten of everyone to expect him to arrange their holidays. He thought that a holiday, however, might be rather nice, especially in the winter. Winter, he mused. Where can you go in the winter? It's so cold. He stopped. Snow. That's it. A holiday with snow. He rushed about. What a great notion. And the very place, Scotland. Plenty of snow. I'll take them to my Uncle Hamish in Glen Dougal and introduce them to the clan. With any luck, I might lose a lot of them in a drift. He chortled and ran round in a circle 9 times. "Scotland the brave," he sang. "Now, where are my skis and my haggis bag and my skates and the woolly cap my Auntie Meggsy knitted?" He threw things out of drawers and hunted in cupboards. "Scotland the brave," he sang. The winter holiday was decided. It is arranged. Dougal's room was crowded. Everyone was there, sitting wherever there was room. Florence, Brian, Mr. McHenry, Mr. Rusty, Dylan, and, half in, half out because of space problems, Ermyntrude. "Now, are we all here?" said Dougal. He was wearing a tartan tammy and looked quite imposing. "Is everyone assembled?" "More or less, dear thing," said Ermyntrude. "And we are all agog, aren't we?" Everyone agreed they were about as agog as they could get. Dougal took up an important position, adjusted his tammy, and told them his plan. They were to go to Scotland. Everyone would be accommodated with Dougal's Uncle Hamish, who had a large house. Everyone would assemble to leave, ready packed, in an hour's time. They all started to talk at once. How could they go to Scotland? How would they know what to wear? "Silence!" shouted Dougal. There was silence. "I don't know what all the fuss is about. I'm ready to leave." "But you knew!" they shrieked. "All right. Just get ready as quickly as you can and we'll start." "Right," said Florence. "Everybody get ready." They all went to get ready. "Don't be long," shouted Dougal. "We won't," they shouted back. And they weren't, but sooner than Dougal had expected they were all back, loaded with luggage and expectation. Mr. McHenry was wearing an overcoat and a muffler and carrying a canvas bag marked Epton McHenry, Botanist. Mr. Rusty also had an overcoat and a muffler and was dragging a large trunk labelled SS Titanic, this side up. Dylan was carrying a guitar, a rucksack, and a large bunch of carrots. Florence had a brand new ribbon in her hair and was carrying a school satchel marked Florence Top and Jog. Brian had a blue case marked Savoy Hotel Laundry and a large bag of lettuce. He dumped these on Dougal's doorstep. "How do we get there, then?" Dougal paled. "What?" he said faintly. "Oh, sorry, have I asked an awkward question?" Florence turned to Dougal. His tammy had slipped over his eyes, and he seemed to be having difficulty breathing. "Are you all right, Dougal?" asked Florence. But before he could reply, there was a loud whistle, and a train arrived outside with a clank and a whoosh. "You weren't thinking of leaving without me, were you?" "No," said Dougal. "No, of course not. You're taking us all to Scotland on holiday, remember?" "Scotland holiday?" said the train. "I never—" But before she could say another word, Dougal started to bundle everyone in. "Now, just a little moment," said the train. "If I'm taking you all to Scotland, 1 or 2 requirements have to be met. There are certain rules for journeys, and I don't move a single puff without them. First, I shall need a guard." "Me," said Mr. Rusty. "I've always wanted to be a guard, man and boy." The train whistled again. "I also need a ticket collector and a buffet attendant and a stoker and a chum to talk to during the dreary bits." Dougal groaned quietly. "Be quicker by bicycle at this rate," he muttered. Dylan was chosen ticket collector. Brian was elected stoker. Mr. McHenry volunteered to ride up front and talk to the train when necessary. All that was needed then was a cook and a buffet attendant. Everyone looked at Florence. "Why are you all looking at me?" she said. "You're a lady," they said, "and so a born provider." Florence sighed. "Oh, all right," she said, "but don't expect too much." They all prepared to get on board, but Dougal made them wait while he went along the train, painting big numbers on each carriage. 1, 2, 3, 4. "What are you doing, Dougal?" they asked. Dougal got in the carriage marked 1. "You don't expect me to travel second class, do you? As leader and thinker, I travel first class. Miss Florence as cook and lady travels second. Rabbits traditionally go third. Mr. McHenry travels in the front and Mr. Rusty in the guard's van." "Well, what about pretty brown-eyed me?" said Brian. "For you," said Dougal, "a special class has been created. Fourth. All aboard! Here we go! Scots wahay!" The train gave a toot and started to move. "You're going without me," wailed Ermintrude. Everyone urged Ermintrude to get in before it was too late. "But where shall I get in?" "Anywhere," they said. So Ermintrude opened a door and got in. "What?" screeched Dougal. "Cows do not travel first." "Too late," they cried. "We're moving." Dougal put his head out of the window. "Stop!" he cried. "Too late!" they shouted. "Toot toot!" went the train. Dougal sighed and sat down. "How long is the journey, dear thing?" said Ermintrude. "I don't know," said Dougal, "but it's going to seem very, very long." The journey. They left the garden and started the journey to Scotland. It was a good moment, like so many starts. Florence was preparing lunch. She was a bit worried because she didn't have enough fish fingers for 7, but, as she said to herself, they could make up with a lot of mashed potato. Mr. McHenry was listening to Brian singing and asking the train every now and again if she was all right. Mr. Rusty was busy guarding, looking out at every station and hoping they might stop so that he could do a bit of flag waving. Dylan had decided that as no one was paying, there was no need to collect tickets, so he was sleeping instead. Ermintrude was singing selections from Carmen. Dougal was looking out of the window. By and large, it was a happy trainful, and it seemed as though the journey to Scotland would be completed in record time. At Crewe, while the train filled herself with what she assured everyone was water, Florence served a light luncheon. Afterwards she made tea and lemonade, and they all sat in the buffet car talking about the journey. "I should like to make absolutely certain of the route," said Mr. Rusty, "so that I know if we go wrong or not. Now, where are the main stops?" Dougal consulted a little map on the wall. "It's quite simple," he said. "It's Crewe, we've been there, Carlisle, Glasgow, Auchenshuggle, Tillytoodlem, Glencoe, and Glendougal." "Bristow! Bristow!" shouted a voice outside. "Bristol?" said Dougal faintly. "I warned you," said Mr. Rusty. Dougal rushed to the window and looked out. A porter was walking along the platform. Excuse me," said Dougal, "is this Bristol?" "Oh, no, me dear," said the porter. "It's Buckner Regis. I'm just shouting Bristol 'cause I likes the name." "Well, there's no need for sarcasm," said Dougal tartly. "And there's no need for soppy questions either," said the porter, going away. Dougal pulled his head back in. "Now, there's no need to panic," he said. "We mustn't panic. I expect there's a perfectly simple explanation, said Florence. There was. Mr. Rusty came back and explained that the train had taken a little detour to see a friend of hers who was about to retire from the railway service. I don't know, said Dougal irritably. What a way to run a railway. Don't worry, said Florence. Don't worry. Don't worry, said Dougal. Someone's got to worry. It would be a fine thing if no one worried, wouldn't it? Well, worrying won't start the train, said Florence. There was a jerk, and the train started. Dougal looked at Florence. When's tea? He said. I'll make it now, sighed Florence. The train went on while they all had tea. They discussed how long it might take to get to Scotland now that they had detoured to Bristol. Dougal and Mr. Rusty were a bit pessimistic, but, as Florence said, the train was going very fast and they weren't likely to go out of their way again. I wish I could believe that, said Dougal gloomily. She's probably got a friend with flu at Aberystwyth. There was a jerk and a crash. What on earth's happening? Said Florence. The train jerked and rolled and bumped. What's happening? Shrieked Dougal. They bumped and finally stopped. There was a noise, muffled and distant, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Haroof, it sounded like. We must have hit something, said Florence. Haroof, went the noise again. I shall go and investigate, said Mr. Rusty. It's my duty. I think we should all go, said Florence firmly. She didn't like the sound of that haroof. Haroof! The noise happened again, but this time it seemed a bit nearer. Listen, whispered Dougal. They all listened. Haroof! I think it's in here, said Florence faintly. Haroof! It's near you, Dougal, said Florence. What? Screeched Dougal, leaping back. There was Brian, looking a bit squashed and a lot annoyed. Thank you, he said. Too kind. Didn't you hear me shouting, you great woolly thing? Steady, Brian, said Florence. I'll never be steady again, said Brian. I'm a squash snail. He went and sat down in a corner, looking like a snail who had been sat on by a dog. The others, led by Dougal, went to see the train. They were in the middle of a field, and the train looked very disconsolate. I went off the rails, she said faintly. Is everyone all right? They assured her they were and helped her back on, Dougal leading the way and others pushing and grunting. When she was back, Florence went to see her. All right now? She asked. Pointing the right way? Quite the right way, I think, said the train, and she gave a little toot. Everyone got on board and they started again. I'm squashed, moaned Brian. Then you won't want cake, will you? Said Florence briskly. I might force down a small piece. So they all had some more tea and cake while the train went on. They passed Carlisle safely, then Glasgow. The eternal city, breathed Dougal, looking out. Then Auchenshuggle, then Tillytoodlem. Dougal began to get excited. Glencoe, he said. Oh, the beauty of it. He opened the windows. Curse ye, Black Campbells, he shrieked. Dougal, please, said Florence. Sorry, said Dougal. I was overcome. The train slowed. She gave a little toot. Dougal rushed to the window again. We've arrived, he shouted. We've arrived. Oh, I'm so happy. I'm squashed, said Brian. Oh, be quiet, they all shouted, rushing to the windows and looking out. The train was pulling into a small station. All around was snow, and the big hills were covered in pine trees, all with snow on them like thousands of Christmas trees. The train stopped with a hiss. Everyone was quiet. Then from the far end of the platform came a sound, a musical sound. The pipes, whispered Dougal. Oh, the pipes. I may cry. They all got out and stood on the platform. Coming towards them, wearing a kilt and a large plaid bonnet and playing a set of bagpipes, was a small black figure. "Uncle Hamish," breathed Dougal. Scotland. Uncle Hamish advanced on them, playing the pipes louder and louder, until finally, just as he arrived, he stopped playing them and there was silence. He fixed them all with glittering eyes. "Where's wee Dougie?" "Wee Dougie's here," said Brian, pushing Dougal forward with his nose. Uncle Hamish looked at Dougal. "You're late, you'll get no tea. And put your tabby on straight, you look like Harry Lauder's mother. Come!" And he put the bag of his bagpipes under his arm, blew powerfully, went quite red in the face, and stumped away down the platform, the pipes wailing. Dougal looked at the others. "He's all right, really," he said, laughing nervously. "It's just his way." "I think we'd better go before Uncle Hamish gets cross," said Florence, and they all followed Dougal down the platform. Uncle Hamish was waiting beside a huge black open car. Get in," he said, and they all got in. "You'd better sit beside me, lassie," he said to Florence. Florence sat in the front seat while Uncle Hamish covered her right up to the chin with a tartan rug. "Everyone ready?" he asked. They were. Uncle Hamish started the engine, put the car into gear, looked round at Florence, gave a huge wink, and they were off. Florence sat back. "It's going to be all right," she thought. They drove away from the station and down a little lane onto the main road. It was getting dark, and a light snow began to fall. "Is it far?" asked Florence. "Oh, just a step, 60 miles. And he gave Florence another huge wink. "We'll be frozen solid," said Dougal. "If you'd rather walk, you can," said Uncle Hamish, turning round and glittering at Dougal. "Uncle, please look where you're going." Uncle Hamish turned back and started down the road. "No one would be foolish enough to get in my way," he said. "Besides, we're there." 60 miles already," said Ermentrude. "My little joke," boomed Uncle Hamish. "Ha, ha, ha!" He turned and looked at them. "Ha, ha, ha!" they said nervously. The car pulled up in front of a huge grey turreted house, and they all got out clutching their luggage. "Angus, where are you, you lopsided lump of rubbish?" The great front door creaked open, and out of it came a huge Highland bull. "Ah, hush your wisht." "Dinna hush your wisht to me," shouted Uncle Hamish. "Ah, didn't shout at me, you wee black bannock." "Get my friends inside," screeched Uncle Hamish. "Why, are they all helpless?" boomed Angus. "I think we'd better go in," whispered Florence, and she went up the front steps followed by the others. Ermentrude was last. She passed Angus. "Hello." Angus stopped glowering at Uncle Hamish and looked at Ermentrude. "Ah, let me carry your hay for you, my dear." "Too kind," murmured Ermentrude. They all stood in the great hall. "You'll find your rooms marked clearly," said Uncle Hamish. "But first I expect you'd like a little something." "Well, it has been a long day," said Florence. "You poor wee creatures," said Uncle Hamish. "Angus, open the door." There, in a huge dining room, with another huge fire burning more huge logs, was a huge table laid with a huge meal. There were scones and potatoes and pies and cakes and carrots and lettuce and ice cream and big pots of tea. "Better get to it," said Uncle Hamish, "before it gets spoiled." So they all sat down to one of the best meals they'd ever had in their lives, and afterwards they were ready for bed. Next morning, Florence woke up early. The frost had made patterns on her window, and from outside came the sound of bagpipes. She went across to the window, rubbed a little hole to see through, and looked out. There was Uncle Hamish, walking up and down in the snow, playing his pipes. Goodness, he must be cold, thought Florence. There was a great booming, clanging noise outside the door. "Breakfast!" bellowed Angus, banging his way down the stairs. And they all went down to breakfast. Uncle Hamish came in and sat at the head of the table. "After you've eaten, I want you all changed into civilized apparel, and that means the kilt. Which tartan do you wear?" He looked at them fiercely. "What about you?" he said to Brian. "McDougal," he squeaked. "What else?" "You go far," said Uncle Hamish. He looked around. "You'll all have to wear the true tartan. I've got a few in the great cupboard. Put them on." He drank a cup of tea, ate 7 kippers in quick succession, and stumped out. After breakfast, they all dressed themselves in the true tartan. Brian had a little difficulty because of his lack of waist and legs, and they finally assembled in the great hall and waited for anything that might happen. Uncle Hamish came in. Behind him was Angus with a bag and a hamper. "All set, then?" said Uncle Hamish. For what, Uncle Hamish?" said Dougal. "Well, it's Tuesday, and on Tuesdays, rain or shine, snow or sleet, sun or typhoon, we hunt the haggis." "Will we be back for lunch?" said Dougal. Uncle Hamish glittered. "Can you think of nothing but your tum, laddie?" Mr. McHenry asked if it would be all right for him to be excused the haggis hunt. He would prefer to look round the gardens. Mr. Rusty said that would suit him better too. "Oh, please yourselves. Come, we're away." "Follow me, dear," whispered Angus to Ermintrude. "What are you whispering about, you great lummock?" "Ah, hist, can I not whisper now?" Uncle Hamish glowered, and they set off on the haggis hunt.